Merry Christmas, everyone! Today is Christmas, at least according to Swedish tradition, because in Sweden we celebrate Christmas today, December the 24th, which is Christmas Eve, with handing out presents and everything else. However, I am not in Sweden for Christmas this year. I haven't been for the last 20 years, actually. The last time was in 1998. And then I told myself never again, because my parents are so terrible, so I don't want to see them again. My mother died this summer actually, and we didn't meet during the last 14 years. And I'm not even sorry that she's dead, because she did basically everything she could to keep me from becoming an adult. And she was extremely controlling, and it never ever changed. So she's dead now, and that's it. My father is still alive. We have no contact because he is a sadist. Fortunately not a physical sadist, but a verbal sadist. He likes to insult people, he loves to insult people, and it's simply not working at all to meet him or have any kind of contact whatsoever. So I have a brother who told me years ago that I should be deported to a concentration camp because I have dark hair, because he's a racist. And the thing is, he is slightly mentally handicapped. He never finished junior high, which is still mandatory school in Sweden. He didn't finish that one. And we believe the reason for this mental handicap is that he fell out of a kind of rucksack in which my dad was carrying him on the back on the last of April in Sweden. I guess it was in the year 1978 or something like that. He was still a baby. And the last of April is a traditional Swedish celebration, the Valborg, which is perhaps a little bit similar to Halloween, where people lit big fires and celebrate together. A lot of drinking, of course, is always in Sweden. And then my brother was a shrewd baby, so he managed to open the seal to this rucksack thing, and he fell out and fell on his head. And we believe that's the reason why he wasn't able to finish school. He has never been able to work. And you can ask yourself, is there a relationship perhaps between this and his racism? I believe there is. I met and heard of other mentally handicapped people too who were racists. And this is of course something that is not talked about in Sweden or elsewhere, because of course we don't want to say anything negative about mentally handicapped people. But in fact there seems to be a strong correlation between this problem and these racist views. Now I also have a sister who is a radical feminist. And you know what you can talk about with radical feminists? Yes, you're correct. You can talk about feminism and nothing else. My sister used to say things like the only difference between men and women is body size and physical strength. And then suddenly she said women make better soldiers because they can take pain better. And this is slightly illogical and doesn't really fit together. So it's just one example of the way that feminists constantly twist the truth according to their own fundamentalist ideology. So it's practically impossible to talk to her. We have had no contact for years and years, or actually decades. So I have no contact with my family, and it's better that way. I live here alone in Munich, and I celebrate more or less Christmas alone. But it's not the best, it's not the worst thing you can do to celebrate Christmas alone. You are by yourself, you can do what you want. There are no other people who tell you what to do, like my mother would if she would be alive and if we would have a contact. And you can simply have a good time alone and do whatever you feel for doing. Traditionally in Sweden we have pork for Christmas, always. traditional Christmas pork. Now I am allergic to pork. I have been allergic to pork for the last 15 or 16 years, something like that. So I'm not able to eat it anymore. It's very strange, just a pork allergy. I can have all other kinds of meat that I know of. There are a few kinds of meat that I haven't tried, like Australian crocodile and kangaroo I haven't tried yet. I haven't tried what they eat in Africa, things like snake, and they eat monkey. I know they eat monkey in Africa as well. I haven't tried that one. But all the kinds of meat I have tried so far, pork has been the only one that really makes me sick. So I don't have pork. I cannot have a traditional Swedish Christmas meal, which is a little bit sad, but that's the way it is. But what I have here is German Kinderpunsch, alcohol-free glögg, because I don't drink alcohol. I never have, actually. That's why I look as I do, as fresh as I do. I'm 45 years old. You wouldn't believe that, I guess. And I think I would make a fairly good Muslim, actually, since I don't eat pork and I don't drink alcohol. Perhaps even a good radical Muslim, who knows, because I'm fairly opinionated. And so what do I have for Christmas? Well, I have here a pineapple. I will have a Christmas pineapple, since I am alone and I can do whatever I want and no one is telling me what to do. So I will have a pineapple. All right? Okay, I put this down. So what can I recommend for other people who are alone for Christmas? What to do? What do you do? Well, two things. I know of a very good and very beautiful Christmas movie, The Polar Express by Zemeckis, I believe, who made Back to the Future, right? And this is a really beautiful and also fun and charming and cozy Christmas movie, animated. It looks really great. It received some bad reviews, I think, when it came out, that it was boring and flat and so on. I don't think so. I watched it a few times and it's really, I like it. I like the atmosphere, the Christmas atmosphere there, and I like the animation and the story. It's great. I love it. Okay, what else do we have? I have here something really great. J.R.R. Tolkien's Letters from Father Christmas. I won't read any excerpts from it or so. You can watch a good video about this book at the Prancing Pony podcast. They uploaded the video where they discussed this book again now for Christmas. I think they made it 2 years ago, something like that. You can watch it there. Prancing Pony podcast is a great podcast which I follow. I have been following for some months, where they discuss in details Tolkien's books, and they also discuss this book. So I will just be very brief about this. This is one of the negative things, one of the few negative things, is it's quite a small format. I would have liked a bigger format of this book, because Tolkien here includes his own illustrations, which are really beautiful and detailed also, especially from the first years, where he did a lot of illustrations in these letters that he wrote, masked as Father Christmas, to his kids from 1920 to 1943, I believe, 23 years. And the last letter he wrote was to his daughter, who was then 14 years old. And in this last letter he writes that when you and your brothers will have your own kids, I will start writing again and come back to you again. So these letters are really charming, really funny. It's a good read. It's a fast read that you can read. You can read them to your kids. I guess there are also translations into different languages if English is not your mother tongue. And it's a fun read. I read it this summer. It was the wrong season. I should have waited, but I couldn't wait to read it, because I after having watched this video at the Prancing Pony podcast, I wanted to read it at once. I knew about this book actually because I was a bit of a Tolkien fanatic in my young teens, as so many aspiring fantasy writers are, I guess, still today, and also a lot of other people. And I knew about this book, but I didn't want to read it at that time. As a teenager, I wasn't interested in this one. But now, when I'm 45, this is really interesting and fun, and you can relive your own childhood, perhaps also the childhood that you never had, but that you should have had, through reading books like this. So it's a really great read. Now, this is my first video from my new library that you see here in the background, my books. And I will take you on a guided tour just for you guys. through my new library, talking about a few of my books and also about the sculptures that I bought for this library and some other stuff. I hope it will be a fun walkthrough through this new library, which is now also my new studio. I will do my videos here from now on. I haven't been on camera for months actually, partly because I had problems with a cold, which came again and again and again in the last few months. I was on antibiotics twice. I lost my voice for over a week, so I couldn't talk, I couldn't even work because I'm a self-employed guy. It's a bit of a problem because you have no salary during that period. It was just for a week or a bit more than a week, but it still was a little bit of a difficult time for me during the last months. So I haven't been on camera. I'm happy to be back on camera and talk directly to you like this, and it's a fun thing, and I look forward to doing many more videos here from this library with you. The last thing I want to do before I take you through this walkthrough through this library is lighting up one of these Tomtebloss, which is a Swedish thing. I hope they will not be too old, because I've had them for a couple of years. You know, I haven't been to Sweden for many years. I received them as a Christmas gift actually from some Swedish friends. It must have been like 18 years ago, and I have most of them still. So let's just try it out if it works. This is something that you use in Sweden for Christmas. You can put it in a Christmas tree and light them up, and it's more fun that you can see than having electric lights in your Christmas tree. This is the real thing. Oh, I guess that's about it. Alright, Merry Christmas guys. I will talk to you again very soon, and join me in this walkthrough through my library. Okay, let's start the walkthrough through my new library. First we have the statue of the Minotaur from Greek mythology. The Minotaur from Crete, half man, half bull, symbol of masculinity and strength. I love this character. And a real bull, or almost real, from Spain actually, from our holiday from September. Okay, this is mainstream fiction. You have first the Greek tragedies. Swedish fiction, H.C. Andersen, his fairy stories, which I want to reread. My parents read me quite a few of these as a child. I want to reread them. And a literary magazine, Ariel, for whom I worked for about 2 years in the 90s. It's some time ago, Swedish magazine. Jane Austen, I haven't read the books, I must say. Perhaps I will someday. Simone de Beauvoir's autobiographies. Why do I have these? From the Pope of Feminism? I don't know really. Biography of Sam Beckett. Uncle Tom's Cabin was an interesting read, although it's not a very good novel. The feminists claim, of course, that this is good because it was written by a woman. Okay. Thomas Bernhard, very good Austrian novelist, one of the very few in Austria who dared to write about the Nazi guilt problem and the Nazi inheritance. Here in Germany, there have been lots of talk about the Nazi era and the Nazi problem, but the Austrians, they choose to keep silent about it, but not Thomas Bernhard. He wrote about this. Elias Canetti, I haven't read that guy yet. It's said to be good. And an old Swedish encyclopedia, Nordisk familjebok. Okay, let's go on. What have we here? Swords. The El Cid sword from the hero legend El Cid, and a katana, a samurai sword, which actually I used in training. I did martial arts for in total 16 years. First karate and later iaido, which I also taught for a few years. I hold the third dan in iaido. This is an iaito, and used in iaido practice. It's a steel iaito, so it's a steel sword. You could sharpen it if you wanted to, but then I would have to keep it in a metal case, which I don't want to, so I won't sharpen it. But normally in iaido practice they use a mix of aluminium and zinc, but this is the real thing actually. Okay. James Clavell, not a very good writer, but I enjoyed reading him. Joseph Conrad is very good. Okay, Swedish. A Swedish classic, Sven Delblanc, a very good writer who grew up in Canada. And he's written about his life in Sweden and in Canada. He was a professor of literature in Uppsala. He died of, I think, leukemia. Okay. Heinrich von Doderer, Austrian writer, Dostoevsky, who is perhaps the best novel writer of all time. I had to get back to Dostoevsky at one point. Umberto Eco, I don't really enjoy Umberto Eco, but I will come back to him because he's written about imaginary countries. It's interesting for fantasy writers. More classics. Biographies. I always loved reading biographies. Even as a teenager, actually. Gustaf Fröding, this is a great Swedish poet. A major Swedish poet from the 1890s. He was very inspired by Nietzsche, my favorite philosopher. Goethe. Goethe was a good poet, but I don't think he was that good as a prose writer, actually. I will come back to Goethe. I will read his poems, more of his poems, and more of his plays. Knut Hamsun, the Norwegian Nobel Prize laureate and Nazi, unfortunately. But he was a good writer. Not everything is good. He wrote a few bad things too, but the things he wrote that were good were very good. Pan, for example, or Hunger, his first novel. Alright, Nordic gods. Balder, one of my favorite Nordic gods, who is said to be similar to Jesus, but I think there are other interpretations as well. Heimdall, blowing his horn. Okay. Hermann Hesse, great writer, inspired by Hinduism and I think Buddhism too. He journeyed in India as well. The Iliad and the Odyssey in Swedish. I read parts of the Iliad in Greek when I studied ancient Greek, which was a great experience. Henry James, I love Henry James. He's such a good psychologist. Okay. Another Odyssey by James Joyce in Swedish. Kafka, great writer. Must come back to Kafka on some occasion. Everything in one volume, and biography. Erik Axel Karlfeldt, Swedish poet, who is the only one who received the Nobel Prize for Literature posthumously in 1932, I think. He was dead already. Kleist. Alright, J.R.R. Koontz, more modern stuff. J.R.R. Koontz is interesting. He's not a good writer, but he writes page turners. and he's a Catholic, so he has something to say, his Catholic values, which you don't have to share. I mean, I'm not a religious person myself, but at least he has something to say which most popular novelists like Stephen King, for example, don't have. Fricka, the wife of Odin himself, complete with wings on his helmet. I think that these sculptures were based on paintings from the 19th century. It looks that way, the way they look. Okay. Selma Lagerlöf, great Swedish writer. Stig Larsson, whom I haven't read. I received these books actually as a gift from a Swedish student. And D.H. Lawrence, whom I must read a lot of. I have read a few things, but I must come back to this guy because there are a lot of similarities in his views on men and women and my own. So this is a really interesting and important writer for me in my own writing. Thomas Mann, whom I never liked. The essays. There are a few good essays. And he has a fairly beautiful language, but he is unable to describe people. Harry Martinsson, a very good Swedish writer, Nobel Prize laureate, who killed himself 2.5 years after receiving the Nobel Prize. He had mental problems and couldn't cope with the criticism because people didn't think he was competent enough for the Nobel Prize nowadays. I think no one would dispute that. Vilhelm Moberg, another Swedish classic, who wrote this masterpiece about some Swedish families who emigrated to the US in 1850 based on a true story. So he did a lot of research, and his books have been turned into films, theatrical plays, musicals, etc., etc., again and again and again. All right. Strindberg, great writer. A bad man but a great writer. I have all his books here, and there are much more. Okay. The mighty god Thor with a little hammer, also I think based on paintings from the 19th century. It looks like that way. Okay. John Cooper Power is interesting and underrated writer. And Proust. I read all of these. 7 volumes. The 8th one is a register. Great work, philosophical, psychological. I'm not keen on the homosexuality in there, but that's the way he was. Rilke. I read this biography during my holiday in September. It was a good book. Rousseau, whom I will study more next year for my own writing. He's becoming increasingly interesting to me. Shakespeare, I love Shakespeare. He's the best playwright probably ever. Isaac Bashevis Singer, great writer, who wrote in Yiddish. Schiller. I don't enjoy Schiller's plays. They are very romantic and haven't aged well, but I think I will read his poetry on some occasion. Solzhenitsyn. And a deer. Hi, hi, hi. Oh, we missed something here. There's a little fox as well. Hi. Alright. Let's go on. Cernunnos from Celtic mythology. And an angel. I've always liked angels. They are mysterious and powerful. I mean, I met people who said they didn't believe in God but they believed in angels, and that's of course is crazy. I don't believe in angels, nor God, nor in neither in God nor in angels, but they are interesting artistically, very interesting. Okay. Stendhal, great writer. Red and Black, great, a great read. Okay. Alfred Lord Tennyson, I have to read his poems on some occasion. Biographies, Tolstoy. 1001 Night. This red volume is richly illustrated, very beautifully illustrated, which I read as a child, and these are the complete books in German. I got stuck in the third volume because not everything is good in there, but the stories in 1001 Night that are good are really good. It's great, so I have to return to that one. So, Wagner. Oscar Wilde, I had to read Oscar Wilde. I haven't read him yet, actually. Yeats, that's another one that I absolutely want to read. Okay. Come to the anthologies now. Myths, romantic poets. And we have a few nymphs dancing with Dionysus. And a fairy, a winged fairy. Alright, anthologies and travel books. Maps. Music. Wagner again, but more from the musical side. An opera dictionary. Some art. I don't have that much art. Books. Comics. I rediscovered comics a few years ago, and it's really interesting stuff. Will Eisner, whom I will most certainly talk about on my channel because it's so interesting. A lot of comics are really this, the history of Swedish literature, art books. Comics can be really psychological and philosophical, and often with very beautiful artwork. Alright. Tall and beautiful Spanish lady dancing. Great. And a little Spanish couple. And for my books, this is Romeo and Juliet. Okay. This is research literature for my own books. This is Simon Tolkien, the grandson of J.R.R. Tolkien, which I will read. A few of them I have read already. To find material, Werner Jäger. To find material for my own books. A lot of interesting stuff. History, psychology, biographies. Okay. So, let's go on. This is great stuff. Beautiful statues. Hand painted. Big statues. Saruman from the Hobbit movies is fighting here at Dol Guldur. And Radagast. I love Radagast from the movies, although the movies are not very good, but I like the character of Radagast. It's so funny. A little bit whimsy. And Gandalf, of course. I love these sculptures, and The reason I bought them was not just because they are beautiful, but also because this, I think, to me, is the most interesting archetype. The old wise man. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And here's another old, not wise, but mysterious and powerful man, the Emperor from the old Star Wars movies. And the Grand Master of them all, Merlin. Really interesting characters. So, let's have a look at some more books. Fantasy, Joe Abercrombie, whom I haven't read yet. I have to read him, certainly interesting. This is my own book. I'm in there as well. White Lights. And Frodo. Susan Cooper, whom I rediscovered as an adult a few years ago. Great stuff. I read them as a young teenager and loved the books. These are the Swedish translations. This is the English original, which I read a few years ago. Oh, this is a bad guy. A ring wraith from the Lord of the Rings movies. Stephen R. Donaldson. Very original and different as a fantasy novelist. Writing about an anti-hero. There are certain similarities to my own writing. So I will continue reading Stephen R. Donaldson, or start again rather. Arven. Beautiful little sculpture. Terry Goodkind. I don't think he's that good as a writer, but he's a political fantasy writer, which I am as well, so I will read him. Aragon. Robert E. Howard, who is not a good writer at all, but he has interesting themes, and he's a bit similar to Rousseau, so I will probably come back to him at some point. Ursula K. Le Guin, great fantasy writer, whom I will start reading again when I can take the time. Fritz Leiber, I haven't read him yet, but I will. C.S. Lewis, I read the books in English for the first time a few years ago, 2 years ago I think. I talked about the books also, all of them on my channel. Great stuff. And J.R.R. Martin. I liked the first 4 seasons of the TV series, and I not only liked it, I loved it, but I didn't enjoy the books. I thought they were boring. I got stuck at the beginning of the 3rd volume. Patrick Rothfuss, whom I will certainly read when I can take the time, and the Grand Master himself. These are new. Yeah. I hoped to read them during Christmas, but I have so many other things to read. The Father Christmas Letters, Beowulf, his Beowulf's translation, The Hobbit, and of course the masterpiece. I got The Lord of the Rings. I got tired of talking when I was like 16 or 17, but I'm coming back to him now. You have to read him, I think, on his own terms. Zelazny, whom I haven't read yet, whom I want to read, certainly interesting. Stephen King. I just have a few books by Stephen King. I had more in Swedish years ago, but I threw them away. I threw away a lot of books, and I don't enjoy him. H.P. Lovecraft, whom I loved, whom I also rediscovered some years ago. Beautiful stories and great language. Edgar Allan Poe, whom I never really tired of. Actually. Oh, this is a nice lady. Right, science fiction. I don't have that much science fiction. I was never a science fiction guy. A little bit as a teenager, but I grew tired of it fairly quickly. Why do I have Flash Gordon? Well, as a writer you need to read various things, a lot and various things, and it's said that Goethe, for example, stole a lot of things, military SF, stole a lot of things from popular fiction of his time. He read a lot of popular fiction and stole ideas for his more ambitious works. Not that I'm planning on stealing, but it's worth reading also things that are not that good sometimes. The series, this is research literature again, the series Philosophy in Popular Culture, Dune, Alien, Terminator and Philosophy, and you have Joseph Campbell, the old Grand Master of mythologies, whom I will certainly read. I have a lot of his books. Okay. Feminism, anarchism, militarism, a lot of extremisms, which I've always been interested in, because it's very interesting psychologically how people can be drawn to such extreme ideologies and why. History, antiquity, Greece, which was always my favorite epoch. This is a late medieval album. Right. Celts, Germanic tribes, Tom Shippey, the Tolkien scholar, was also written about the Vikings. Oh, this is a Greek helm, beautiful, from Greece. Swedish history, Russian history, Vienna, shortly before World War I, the outbreak of World War I. I love old Vienna with the cafes and the palaces. They had style at that time. National socialism, of course, important if you live here in Germany to understand the past. 20th century, history of communism. And Peter Ackroyd, whom I will certainly read. Books about London, about the Thames, and villages and towns around the river, Venice, magazines. I love reading magazines as well, Geo. They have a lot of good stuff. History of the Indians, and psychology. Books about archetypes, which I used a lot for my first novel, White Lights. The warrior, the king, the magician. More psychology. Al Gore, An Inconvenient Truth, important stuff. Some natural science, I don't have that much. Computer science, even less. Fitness, cooking, and some economics, very little. Right. Fitness magazines, bodybuilding magazines, and languages. English, business English, French, Greek. And Feast of Love, beautiful couples. This is great. A celebration of beauty, youth, and strength. Great stuff. I love this. Okay, languages. That's German. Different languages. I even have some Welsh. Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, who with his sword cuts through the illusions. He has lotus, and I think a scroll. Yeah. A girl doing yoga. I've been doing yoga for a year and a half, although I didn't do it much the last few months because I was ill again and again. I had recurring bad colds. I have a cold now as well. Swedish, as you can hear. German. An Om, the Om sign. It's a beautiful sculpture. The most sacred and important syllable in Sanskrit in the yoga practice. Religious books, Eastern wisdom, Buddhism, Hagakure, samurai literature, Zen. Alright. And a wolf. Hi. You look kind. Alright. The Sleeping Beauty. Okay. Japanese aesthetics. Meditation, Budo, Tai Chi, and Jewish books, Jewish history, dogs. The Bible, apocryphic texts, Jakob Böhme, Christian mystic, inspired Hegel and Schelling. And now we come to philosophy. Adorno, Aristotle, St. Augustine, Deleuze, crazy guy, Derrida, crazy guy, Meister Eckhart, probably also crazy but interesting, Emerson, oh I love Emerson, I have to read Emerson again. Oh, there are so many interesting things to read. A lifetime is not enough. History of Austrian philosophy, David Hume, great stuff, and Sophie's World in Swedish. I read it when I almost had my master's degree in my pocket. I read it too late. I should have read it some years before. Ingmar Hedenius, Swedish philosopher, who was inspired by Nietzsche. Okay. And female beauty. Oh, beautiful ladies. Oh, look at this one. Oh, this is great. Female beauty is what makes life worth living for a man. She's undressing here. Okay. So, more philosophy. Hegel, important. Oh, look at this guy. I received it for free when I ordered something. Alright, Hegel, whom I want to read more of. Familiar basically only with his aesthetics. He inspired, of course, Marx and other Marxists, but he was himself conservative. And I think a conservative like me should know his Hegel. William James, the psychologist brother of Henry James and Nietzsche. All right, the man himself. Oh, this is Aristotle. And Kant. Kierkegaard. Hans Larsson, Swedish philosopher. I have a lot of books by Hans Larsson. Okay, more Hans Larsson. And Mark Aureli. Nietzsche in English, and the complete works in German. His poetry as well. Conversations with Nietzsche by contemporaries. biographies, several biographies, and other books on Nietzsche. Konrad Paul Liesmann from Austria on Nietzsche. Other books on Nietzsche's family, on his history. Plato, whoa, complete works of Plato. I read a few, but not all. Bertrand Russell. Sartre, who was not a good philosopher, but he was a good fiction writer. And a Schofield from the 1870s, replica. The US Army bought 7,000 of these until they replaced it with something else. And it's a beautiful weapon, heavy. And you can see it in the movie Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood. Schelling, Schopenhauer, Seneca, Sophists. Oh, look at this one. Hi. Georg Henrik von Wright, who wrote The Environmentalist, who replaced Wittgenstein as professor of philosophy in Cambridge. He followed in Wittgenstein's footsteps, not philosophically that much, but took over his professorship. He's dead now. Dictionaries, anthologies. A Swedish philosophical magazine. Okay. More philosophy of music, and more books on philosophy in popular culture. This has become very interesting to me in recent years. Yeah, Batman and philosophy, which I talked about on my channel already. Game of Thrones and philosophy, I did a long video on that one. Lord of the Rings and philosophy, Hobbit and philosophy. I've talked about this on my channel. Sherlock Holmes and philosophy, Harry Potter and philosophy. This is really interesting stuff. Professional philosophers and others who discuss philosophical themes in popular culture, in movies, books, comics, etc. This is really interesting, not just to bring philosophy to the people, but also because there are really interesting philosophical themes in popular culture which are well worth examining. And this mix of philosophical depth and, in a way, superficiality and stereotypes, the depth behind the stereotypes, to discover that and discuss that in detail, that's a really interesting thing. Okay, that's my library. Let's turn around and have a look. Okay, swords. And this is a place where I'm going to do my videos from now on. Okay, thank you for watching.